The 71st Sydney to Hobart yacht race is underway, and it's the American Super Maxi Comanche that leads the way in the early stages. The boat that gave Wild Oats a scare last year is well and truly giving it a fright again in 2015. It jumped out of their heads, although it was quite tight going early on between Wild Oats and also Perpetual Loyal as they battled to get out of Sydney Harbour. But that's when Perpetual struck trouble, unable to get the spinnaker up, and Perpetual, the boat with the celebrities on board, Michael Clark, the former Australian cricket captain, are amongst those that are on the ride to Hobart this year, the 628 nautical mile journey. They almost came to a standstill as the other Super Maxis disappeared into the distance. Perpetual struggled and lost a lot of race time early on today. It's Comanche who's setting the pace. Right behind it is Rambler 88. It's 12 foot shorter than the Super Maxis, but one of the most sophisticated boats in the fleet. And it's well and truly showing that it'll be in the mix again. It'll be in the mix as we head towards Hobart. This boat needs to finish within 4 hours of the Super Maxis to be a chance at handicap honours, and it's thereabouts at the moment. In terms of Wild Oats, the 8-time line honours winner, it's chasing a ninth. It's thereabouts, still trailing Comanche and hanging next to the other Super Maxi in Ragamuffin 100, with Sid Fisher on board. 88 years of age, Sid Fisher, in another journey across Bass Strait as he heads down the east coast. So we wait to see what those Super Maxis will do. In terms of weather, pretty good start conditions for competitors today, but we're expecting a change to come later in the day. Some of the bigger boats might be past that, and what that might mean is for some of the smaller yachts, it might be a rough first night that they'll have to encounter. Winds are expected to drop off tomorrow, which in the past has favoured Wild Oats. That crew, one of the best at racing that yacht in all kinds of conditions. So as the wind dies, expect Wild Oats to challenge Comanche, but it's the Americans, the Super Maxi in Comanche, that leads the way early on in the 71st Sydney to Hobart yacht race. It's the Americans that lead the way on day 2 of the 71st Sydney to Hobart yacht race, but it's not the one that many expected. Rambler 88, the 88-footer, is leading the way from Comanche, the Super Maxi, and the story of the last 24 hours has been the retirements that we've seen in this race. Up to 40-knot winds overnight have battered the crew, and in the last few hours the number of casualties has continued to grow. The biggest of those names is Wild Oats 11. The Super Maxi, the 8-time line honours champion, is back in Sydney. It won't be a 9th crown for that crew this year. They're out of the race after a torn mainsail in those 40-plus knot winds last night. They're out of the race. Perpetual Loyal, another Super Maxi, is out of the race. And earlier today we received news that an emergency beacon was set off the New South Wales coast. The rescue helicopter was sent to investigate. The good news is the crew aboard that boat are well. It was accidentally set off and they will continue to race. So the fleet is gradually diminishing. It's now down, well, about 20 under what it started at, so running at about 88 yachts in the fleet at the moment, and it is Rambler 88 leading the way from Comanche. The two leaders are sitting just on the top edge of Bass Strait, at the northeastern side of Bass Strait, and that's where conditions will start to ease. They're looking at 15 to 20 knots south-southwesterly winds for most of the day. Later tonight, for the fleet that catches that part of the coastline or into Bass Strait tonight, they're looking at 10 to 15 knots as they enter the northeastern part of Bass Strait. The leaders, be interesting to see how they go as they now chase wind on their run to Hobart. Headed by Rambler 88, not far behind is Comanche, who also almost had to pull out last night with rudder damage. They made running repairs and that boat sits second. Third is Sid Fisher's Ragamuffin, and lurking in fourth is the Italian boat in Maserati.
Well, it's shaping up to be a battle of tactics between American yachts Comanche and Rambler 88 as they head towards the Sydney to Hobart finish line. Super Maxi Comanche has maintained its lead over Rambler as the yachts sail down the east coast of Tasmania. Reporter Scott Rollinson is at the finish line at Constitution Dock in Hobart. Well, Scott, both of the front runners suffered some damage earlier in the race. How are they holding up?
Holding up well, Siobhan. The skipper of Comanche said they'll limp to Hobart if they have to. They're limping quickly at the moment and are in front by 14 nautical miles over their US rival
in Rambler. The 88-footer sits second at the moment. Behind them is Sid Fisher's Ragamuffin 100, one of the few remaining super maxis in this race, with the retirements of Wild Oats 11 and Perpetual Loyal. So one of 2 of 4 super maxis left, sitting first and third, and in fourth is the Italian boat Maserati that's coming up the east coast of Tasmania at the moment. But they've still got a bit of a journey to go, and the time that they're due behind me here at Constitution Dock in Tasmania in Hobart continues to change. We're looking at, originally it was 4 o'clock, then 5 o'clock. Now we're thinking maybe 9 o'clock as the winds start to drop off here for this final leg of the journey as they make their way into the Derwent and the final part of this 628 nautical mile trek from Sydney to Hobart.
And it can be, of course, a very slow prospect once the fleet turns into the Derwent, but do you think we might be able to see a duel up the Derwent this time?
I think that's what everyone hopes for, would be a grandstand finish, not only between the two Americans, but it'd be great if Ragamuffin and Maserati could vie into the mix late in the piece here as well to give a real grandstand finish. We haven't seen that for a while. It would be nice to see coming up the Derwent, but a few markers, Siobhan, that you'll start to hear through the afternoon, because people, after a couple of days of sailing, will start to get excited when there's sight of the leader coming around the turn and up the Derwent. When you do start to get to that point, Tasman Island's still 40 miles away from the finish line. So when they reach that point, there's still a bit to go. And again, at the Iron Pot is another marker we'll use this afternoon to measure how long till the finish line. Still 11 nautical miles from there to the finish. So they've got a journey to go. As I say, the wind's starting to die off. And speaking to the Commodore of the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, John Cameron, a little earlier, he was saying that might favour Rambler. The smaller boat might fare better in those softer winds coming into the final stretch.
So do you think there are any race records up for grabs?
I wouldn't think so. The overall race record is completely done and dusted. Wild Oats 11's record from 2012 is now put to bed. It's well, they were leading that for quite a while with favourable conditions coming down the New South Wales coast. But then at night one, the southerly change that came through that really took out the majority, or not the majority, but a number of casualties that have happened in this race came from that first night and those stronger winds, over 40 knots that came through, and that slowed progress down the coast. So that's taken race record out of the equation. To be honest with you, I haven't checked on the handicap record as to where that sits at the moment, but I can tell you the order for handicap. Quick Point is 0. Shane Kearns' boat's the smallest boat in the field. He bought this boat on his credit card. It would be a great story if he can get over the line and win on handicap. He sits first in the race for handicap at the moment from King Billy. Rambler, who sits second overall, second for line honours at the moment, is also sitting third overall. Chinese Whisper fourth at the moment in handicap, and the Super Maxi in Comanche is in the top 5 on handicap at the moment. So that'll obviously change depending what happens over the next 24 hours or more. But as I say, we wait to see what will happen for line honours a little bit later this afternoon, and probably more likely into this evening.
Scott, Comanche looks set to win by a comfortable margin, vindicating the decision not to quit on the first night.
It was a smart decision in the end, Peter, after what looked like a major shock after we lost Wild Oats 11, who Damien mentioned there, didn't make it to the finish line this year. Comanche also suffered damage in wild winds on the first night. We had reports that it had pulled out of the race, it had retired, and it also had made the turn heading back towards New South Wales. Short time later, it flipped around and was heading back towards Hobart. So whatever decision was made by the crew, it's proved to be a good one. And after losing to Wild Oats last year in their first attempt, the US Super Maxi, that's widely considered as the fastest in the world, will dock here in Hobart, and it will have a Sydney to Hobart line honours title in, well, only a couple of hours' time now, Peter, depending on how quickly it gets through Storm Bay and up the rest of the Derwent. Hopefully at this stage looking like a 9 o'clock finish.
Most of the smaller boats are still in Bass Strait. Is there any indication who's going to take out the handicap honours?
Enchantress leads at the moment, a South Australian boat, but the couple of front runners are still in the mix. Comanche sits second at the moment. Perhaps, as you say, vindicating the decision to go on. The double is well and truly still a chance, especially once it gets in, to use a golf term, and becomes the handicap, the clubhouse leader. Who knows what will happen in regards to the other yachts coming down the coast over the next day or two. So Comanche in a good position. Rambler as well has been in the mix for that that title in the handicap race as well. It's slowed in the last few hours and has fallen away from Comanche in the race for line honours. It's also fallen back in the handicap stakes. It now sits 6th, so the best chance of the two Americans to take the handicap title is Comanche. It will take the line honours crown, Peter, but at this stage, Enchantress from South Australia leading on handicap.
Let's go live to Hobart now, and the ABC's Scott Rollinson joins me from Constitution Dock. Scott, what's the latest? Where is Comanche?
Adrian, very, very close. Yeah, the crowd is starting to build behind me on Kings Pier, the top end of Constitution Dock. There's just that little murmur of noise starting to build, and you can see people gazing out into the Derwent, wondering when they'll get a glimpse of the US Super Maxi. It's not too far away, so it will become the 2015 Line Honours champion. The US Raider will take the title, and it's had quite a journey to get here. Last year, beaten by Wild Oats 11 by just 90 minutes and really threw down the gauntlet to one of the best boats we've ever seen in this competition in Wild Oats. It's come back for another title shot, and it will take out the trophy. So we're just waiting for the last 40 minutes or so. We're expecting at the speed it's travelling, if it can stay at that speed, about 40 minutes until it crosses the finish line in the Derwent, and we'll have a new Line Honours champion in this yacht race.
And Scott, we are looking at live pictures of Comanche sailing in now. What's the weather like there now? What are the conditions like?
Light breeze. It's just started to pick up a little bit. They've been battling today after those really strong winds on the first day that knocked the fleet around. Mentioned Wild Oats before. That's what put it out. It also put the likes of Perpetual Loyal, 2 of the 4 Super Maxis, knocked out on that first night in the heavy winds. Since then, it's been pretty good going. And tonight and today, for most of the day, light winds, but Comanche's managed to handle them quite well. Speaking earlier today to the Commodore of the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia, John Cameron, he thought that maybe that might play into Rambler 88's hands a little bit, the 88-footer chasing for the majority of this race, chasing Comanche, and he thought maybe it might handle the winds just that little bit better. Hasn't proven to be the case. Comanche has managed the conditions beautifully. It stretched the lead through the day. It now leads Rambler by a long, long way. We're not expecting Rambler until around 10:30 tomorrow morning at current projections. So Comanche well and truly in front, and it's as I say, put a huge gap to second in Rambler.
Wow, that is a big time difference. Comanche did suffer some rudder damage. How did that affect its run?
Well, what it's done is it's actually led to an interesting story for Comanche, one of the pre-race favourites, and that wild conditions on the first night that put Wild Oats out. We heard about 20 minutes later that Comanche was then turning around and heading back to Sydney, and it had retired from the race. So at that point, the 2 favourites were gone, and everyone thought this race is well and truly wide open now. About 20 minutes after that, just to throw things a little curveball into the mix, Comanche turns around. They decided to continue. So we're not sure who made that call. We'll find out when the crew, Ken Reid, the skipper, and the crew dock here in a short time. But someone decided that they would continue on in the race. 2 rudders on this boat. One was damaged, and they thought they'd push on, make the repairs they could at sea. It's proved to be a pretty smart decision. They'll take the Line Honours trophy, and at the moment they're sitting second on handicap as well. So there's every chance Comanche could take the Line Honours and handicap double.
So what does it mean for an American to be winning the Sydney to Hobart this year, an American yacht?
I think for this crew in particular, it means a lot to them. The skipper said after that tough first night that they would limp to Hobart if they had to. He didn't care this was the day after they'd made the decision to continue. He said, we're getting there and we're finishing this race. And that's what they've done. And they've managed to limp really, really quite quickly. They've outpaced their competitors through Bass Strait and then down the Tasmanian east coast. But it's worth pointing out that they've had a fight on their hands for the majority of the race from Rambler. The 88-footer, it's also an American, I believe out of the Cruising Yacht Club of New York, and they've been chasing Rambler after that incident on the first night when Comanche considered retiring. They were then chasing Rambler for the majority of the second day before Rambler itself had similar damage to Comanche. So Both of the leaders have been battling damaged rudders, amongst other things, as they've headed down the Tasmanian east coast. And then to add to that, the boat that sits in third in Ragamuffin 100, it also damaged a rudder today. So the first three will come in battered and bruised after the 628 nautical mile journey. But for that crew of Comanche, who really had a lot of expectations coming into this race, they wanted to knock off Wild Oats 11. I think part of them will be disappointed that they didn't get the chance to beat Mark Richards' crew over the line fair and square without that yacht pulling out. I think they'll be disappointed slightly in that, but nonetheless, I'm sure that won't hamper the celebrations.
All right, the ABC's Scott Rollinson will leave you there for the time being with the prediction that the yacht will cross the line in about 35 minutes from now.
A short while ago, the damaged Comanche was inching to victory in more benign conditions. Scott Rollinson is at Constitution Dock in Hobart. And Scott, with victory all but assured, what is the significance of this win by the Super Maxi?
Well, Clint, perfect timing. Victory is assured. It's just gone over the finish line as we speak. And excuse me for being rude, as I just have a little peek over the shoulder. In a moment, you'll see it past me in the Derwent. Comanche, the first in to Hobart. It is the Line Honours champion in this year's Sydney to Hobart yacht race. And the significance is huge in the sense that this boat has come back. It's tackled Wild Oats 11, who beat it last year, and it's won Line Honours crown. It's considered the fastest boat in the world. The crew really wanted this title. Owned by Jim Clark and Christy Hinds Clark. Christy Hinds' mother just spoke a short time ago to the ABC and said they are delighted. The party will continue. They haven't had much sleep, the friends and family who've been watching on. So it's just about to dock here at Constitution Dock, Clint, in Hobart, and Comanche's celebrations will begin. The first across the line in Line Honours race anyway, in this year's Sydney to Hobart yacht race.
Terrific effort, Scott, considering 32 of the 108 entries failed to finish. What about the handicap title? Who are the contenders?
Continues to change, this one, Clint. It's seesawed through the day and will continue to as some of the yachts in contention are still making their way through Bass Strait. This big one behind me, Comanche, it's still in contention to take the double. It was sitting second on last check in the handicap race, and not a bad place to be. It's laid down the marker. They'll sit in the clubhouse, so to speak, now and watch what the others do. And if the weather happens to turn for the worse, not expected to do so, but if it does provide a slight challenge for some of the smaller yachts coming in, we could see Comanche not only have one trophy, but two. It might take out Line Honours as well as handicap, and the celebrations might continue just that little bit longer.
Scott Rollinson, perfect timing. Thank you.
Team Comanche has celebrated long into the night after the American Super Maxi was first across the line in the Sydney to Hobart yacht race. Today, the race is still on for minor placings and handicap honours.
It took 2 days, 8 hours and 58 minutes to arrive. But when Comanche reached Hobart's Constitution Dock, it didn't take long for the celebrations to begin. The US Super Maxi is the first American yacht to take out the Blue Water Classic since 1998.
This is a hard race. You guys have a hard race here. That's a one hard body of water. I've sailed around the world 2.5 times, and I thought I'd seen it all, but that is one really tough body of water. So the people who have done this race something like 25 times, God bless them. Either they're the dumbest people on earth or they're the hardest people on earth. Probably a combination of the two.
Battered and bruised after strong winds smashed the fleet on Boxing Day, Comanche limped home with a damaged daggerboard and rudder that almost forced them out of the race. Co-owner Christy Hinds Clark became the first female owner to win the Sydney to Hobart and says it was an eventful journey.
There was a bunch of emotions that went on, pure terror at one stage, excitement, now just total joy and fulfillment. I mean, it's one of the best things I've ever done.
When the sun rose, eyes turned to a duel on the Derwent. Sid Fisher's Ragamuffin 100 caught and then passed Rambler 88. Ragamuffin skipper David Witt says it became a race of tactics.
Their tactician, he decided to jibe off. So we had to make the decision whether to go with them or not, and clearly we made the right one not to go with them. So I think that was part of the reason the boys were quite happy to. I mean, they're world-class guys on Rambler, so it was good to get one up on those boys.
It's another great result for Ragamuffin 100's 88-year-old owner, Sid Fisher.
Sid, what about you? How does this one rate as a finish?
Oh, it was satisfactory. About all you can do.
That's as good as a compliment you get, isn't it? Satisfactory?
Yeah. It was a good team. That's the main thing.
Maserati, Ichiban and Chinese Whisper are all expected in later today, while attention now turns to the handicap crown. Scott Rollinson, ABC News, Hobart.
The 12th yacht to complete the Sydney to Hobart yacht race has arrived at Constitution Dock. Indian crossed the finish line this morning, but the bulk of the fleet is not expected until later this afternoon. Reporter Scott Rollinson is on Constitution Dock in Hobart. Now, Scott, the first cruise into the dock must be nursing a few hangovers by now, but the race is still very much on for many others.
Yeah, I think the celebrations are well and truly on, as almost as much as the race for handicap at the moment, Siobhan. There is still quite a wait for the other boats to come in. 65 still to come, as you say, 12 now docked behind me at Constitution Dock, the last of which is skippered by Craig Carter, Indian, out of WA, the 12th boat to finish. All led by Comanche the other day in terms of line honours, but the one we're waiting for now is who will take the handicap trophy. And at the moment, that's led by Shane Kearns' boat, Quick Point Azuro, the smallest boat in the field. It's still out at sea, still making its way down the Tasmanian east coast. It's in with a chance, but the one that's sitting pretty right behind me is Paul Clitheroe's yacht, Balance. He's been here for almost a day or so now, and he's was leading on handicap for quite a while. Azuro has just jumped back in front, so the battle is on in regards to that. And there's one that we're keeping an eye on as well in Wild Rose, last year's handicap winner. It's sitting 5th and still in the mix, but needs to be in by about 4 o'clock this afternoon, Wild Rose, if it's a chance. For Quick Point, it needs to be done by 4:15 tomorrow morning, Siobhan, if it's to knock off Paul Clitheroe's boat, Balance, and take the handicap title.
Now, yesterday when we were watching the tussle for second place, we saw some really still conditions on the River Derwent, but it has slowed to an absolute crawl on the river today, thanks to just a complete lack of wind. How tricky is that?
Well, it's just picked up just before I started to talk to you, Siobhan, but before that this morning it was almost just like a glassy river this morning, the River Derwent. Celestial, who came across the line in 10th, took 10 hours to do the last 40 nautical miles. So it had done the majority of the journey. It had made the turn at Tasman Island to come up the Derwent and complete the last part of the voyage, and it took 10 hours to get from the turn almost up to the top of the river, up to where we're docked here at Constitution Dock. So it is slow going. The winds are not favourable at this point for quick finishing, but as Craig Carter from Indian, the last boat in, said, almost frustrating. You make your way down the coast, you make the turn in, you think the race is almost over, and then you're sitting just waiting for a bit of wind to push you a little closer to Hobart.
Scott Rollinson, at least there's plenty of action for you to look at where you are. Thank you very much.
The bulk of the Sydney to Hobart fleet is due to finish the race tonight, including Quick Point Azuro. It's the smallest boat in the fleet, but could cause the biggest upset yet by taking out the handicap honours. Scott Rollinson reports.
Paul Clitheroe isn't putting money on his yacht, Balance, taking out handicap honours. The smallest boat in the fleet is now challenging.
If they scurry home in this beautiful breeze and they beat us, seriously, good luck to them. I'll be here to clap them.
Race organisers say Quick Point Azuro has proven a wise investment.
The guy bought it for $20,000 worth of bank card. I won't tell you what he spent doing it up, but it's a beautiful craft.
WA yacht Indian was one of the first into Hobart this morning, although its arrival took longer than expected.
We got into the Derwent at 4. We had to wait 4 hours to get a bit of breeze, and that's pretty normal. It was just, but you can't time your entry.
A change in wind in the afternoon pushed the fleet home quickly, including Da Nang, the first of the round-the-world clipper fleet.
Someone asked me on the way in, is this my favourite one? And I think it is now, yeah.
Skipper Wendy Tuck is the first female skipper home.
Over the years, I've got lots of advice from very good sailors as well, and all their thoughts that have told me over the years were coming back into play as well.
After 628 nautical miles, tough conditions on the first night on Boxing Day, and then slow racing as they've made their way down the Tasmanian east coast. Competitors are now being helped by strong winds as they make their way up the Derwent, and by later tonight, behind me here on Constitution Dock, we're expecting more than half the fleet to have reached their destination. The last boat is currently expected on New Year's Day. Scott Rollinson, ABC News, Hobart.